So, 2025, quarter way through the century. Interesting. Hello and welcome to 2025 and the first episode of Almost Breaking News for the new year right here on the Everything Electric channel. So, Happy New Year. I think most of us know that 2025 is likely to be a challenging year, but I just want to underline the fact that the transport and energy transition we are just starting to witness is a global shift. No single country or leader can do it alone, and no single country or leader can stop it. They can, of course, delay it a bit. So we should take comfort in that. And I just want to say to the very few negative critics of these episodes that if what I say upsets you so much, there really are plenty of other YouTube channels and furious posts on what used to be called Twitter, and you can spend time agreeing with them. So maybe go there and just ignore this silly old man. We've teamed up with Duracell Energy to celebrate their brilliant ecosystem of home energy products and their platinum homeowner offer by giving away a Duracell bunny. To win, simply watch to the end and answer a question about the Fully Charged show. Now, we've been burning gigatons of fossil fuels over the last 150 years in steadily increasing amounts, and we are now burning more than we ever have in human history. Aren't we clever? Burning anything releases gases and toxins into the atmosphere. We all know that. Some of those emissions are fairly minor and benign, and our seas, plants and atmosphere can deal with them without much long-term harm. Some of them, of course, are really toxic, and if you were to breathe them in for more than a few seconds, you will die. All notions of finding a clean way to burn fuel are either at best built on pure hopium or at worst a semi-criminal con job. So there is no way anyone can get away with claiming burning billions of tons of fossil fuel every day has zero effect. The fossil fuel industry and their hordes of apologists and enablers all know this. So having run out of increasingly desperate excuses and facetious arguments, the fossil fuel industry have finally acknowledged that the externalities of burning the fuel they supply are a problem. But they have a solution. Yes, they will capture these dangerous gases, well, some of them, and store them. And the world's press hears this and breathes a sigh of relief. Oh, thank heavens, they say. We don't have to change our behavior. We can carry on burning all this fuel without a second thought, because we're going to use carbon capture and storage to safely remove the problem. Case closed. Move on. Talk about something else. I'm not going to go into any more details why this is a con job. I can only encourage you to follow the link in the show notes beneath this episode and read a short article by David Ho, an American scientist and oceanographer from the University of Hawaii. He's not saying carbon capture and storage won't ever work. He's a proper scientist, not a shallow loudmouth like me. He explains that if we were to reduce our CO2 output by 90%, then running massive carbon capture and storage plants around the world, if they were powered exclusively by renewable energy generation, might just about make sense over the following 50 years. But those cheeky little fossil lobbyists are not going to go into details like that. No, they just use this theoretical technology to hoodwink the public, the media, and sadly our politicians into thinking that this might be some kind of solution. It certainly is a solution for the fossil fuel industry. They can keep raking in the tax breaks, the subsidies, and the massive profits for another 20 to 30 years. Isn't that lovely? Next story. Batteries and how long they last. Now, some men love to go on and on and on about how short the life of a battery is and how you can't buy a second-hand electric car because you'll immediately have to replace the battery. In a recent report on Electrek by Sebastian Schall, it's revealed that the German research group P3 tested over 7,000 electric vehicles of all makes and models and sizes, which provided deep insights into the battery life and vehicle residual value. It's important to understand the difference between half-baked opinion on battery longevity and actual hands-on, peer-reviewed, data-rich scientific research, which is what these P3 folks have been doing. They discovered that after 200,000 kilometers or 125,000 miles, the vast majority of the batteries they measured were still well above 80% of their original capacity. What is more impressive is after this loss of capacity, the battery remains stable at higher mileages of up to 300,000 or 186,000 miles. They also saw that a large percentage of the batteries they tested were at 90% of their original capacity after 300,000 kilometers. I don't know if you've recently seen a car that has covered that kind of distance. Any car, diesel, petrol, hybrid. Sorry, there's no way a hybrid would last that long. Anyway, there's too much complexity in that technology. Anyway, sorry, it always fails. But anyway, moving on. Generally speaking, cars are an absolute wreck after 300,000 kilometers, worn out, knackered, absolutely stuffed full of spare parts they've had to have put in them. However, in electric cars, the battery is fine after these kinds of distances. So what men should say about second-hand electric cars, or third, fourth and fifth-hand one, is buy the battery and you'll probably have to replace the car. Next story. As regular viewers will know, we have been burning coal for close to 200 years. And when you burn coal, there's loads of problematic stuff left after you've burnt it. I'm not talking about the massive clouds of choking toxic fumes. I'm talking about coal ash. Absolutely banal coal ash. There's loads of it. Massive piles of it are built up over the years. It's a huge problem that is, of course, never mentioned when people drone on and on with fantasy information about wind turbines or solar panels. No one ever mentions the mountains of coal ash that we've got to deal with. But now it turns out that these gargantuan piles of toxic filth might just contain something useful. This is a bonkers new bit of research led by the University of Texas at Austin and has found out that the national coal ash supply contains enough rare earth elements to significantly bolster the national supply in the United States without any new mining. That is so weird. They have found that there could be as much as 11 million tons of rare earth elements in accessible coal ash in the United States, which is nearly 8 times the amount that is in the US currently has in domestic reserves, i.e. in places where they dig it up. I mean, that is just bonkers. It's a crazy story, but this is yet another illustration of how the demand for new materials to make better, longer-lasting, more sustainable technologies drives innovation and research in areas that we would never previously considered. What are we going to do with all that coal ash? Absolutely nothing. That would be the response a few years ago. Now it's a different story. Next story. Now, many people in Australia will know this, but the rest of the world might be surprised. I certainly was when I learnt it. The two countries with literally zero regulations around tailpipe emissions, or as I like to call them, toxic carcinogenic exhaust pipe gases, are Russia, no surprise there, and Australia. That is, until this year, where finally, after the opposition, obviously supported by the fossil fuel industry, have fought against this change for decades, Australia will finally impose a pollution cap on new vehicles. Okay, so the old ones can still belch out as much toxic gas as they like, but at least things will start to change. Electric utes, vans and sports cars from a wide range of automakers will roll into Australia over the next 12 months in what is expected to become a milestone year for low-emission vehicles. The new Vehicle Efficiency Standard came into effect on the 1st of January, setting a pollution limit for fleets of passenger vehicles and another for light commercial vehicles such as utes and large four-wheel drives, which I can tell you are very popular in Australia. It's extraordinary what is happening in Australia, and we will be reporting from various places in the lead up to the Everything Electric show in Sydney on March the 7th, 8th and 9th. I'm not saying you should be there if you're in the area, but I'll say this. You should be there because it's going to be absolutely amazing. It's going to be the biggest show we've ever done in the world. It's really worth visiting. Next story, floating solar. Now, we've had a bit of floating solar in the UK for a few years, large solar arrays on floats in our reservoirs. There are two obvious benefits to this idea. One, the solar panels do not not take up space that could be used for something else. It's just like a big lake. And 2, they reduce evaporation. Now, to be fair to the weather in the UK, we do get water evaporating from our reservoirs every now and then in midsummer, but it's not really a big issue because we get loads of rain. In much warmer and sunnier Asian countries with maybe less rain, this really can be a problem. And so it makes a huge amount of sense for them to install as much floating solar as possible. And according to this report from the Progress Playbook, that is what they are doing big time. The global floating solar market, I never thought I'd say those words. The global floating solar market will swell to 77 gigawatts of installed capacity by 2033, according to forecasts by Wood Mackenzie. But there are already huge lake, reservoir and offshore floating solar arrays in China, India, Indonesia and Taiwan. China is currently installing a 1 gigawatt offshore solar array 8 kilometers off the eastern coast of Donying City in Shandong province. The project covers an area of approximately 1,223 hectares. But it's not just Asia. In Ghana, there is already a 1 megawatt floating solar array in operation on a reservoir, and after successful tests, this is being extended to a 12 megawatt array. Yet another illustration of how the demand for cleaner energy drives better, longer lasting, more sustainable systems and drives innovation and research in areas we would never previously have considered. I know it's a repetition, I'm just saying. Next story. This is from a report in Electrive by my old friend Carla Westerheide, which looks at the Trump administration's plans for electric vehicles. The president wants to spend the money the previous administration earmarked for public chargers on defense. You know, because the US Defense Department runs on an absolute shoestring. I mean, back in 2023, they had to scrape by on a mere $916 billion US dollars. The Trump transition team specifically recommends imposing tariffs on battery materials worldwide to boost US production. The main goal is to secure China-free supplies of batteries and the critical minerals to build them. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the only problem is China have been investing, researching and building vast battery manufacturing capacity for the last 15 to 20 years, while in the USA, there was a stream of new petrol and diesel vehicles launched with flashy adverts, even though none of the underlying technology was even new or mildly interesting. But yes, it's not particularly good news for the development of zero-emission ground transport. I quote from Electrive. The Trump Transition Administration spokeswoman, Caroline Leavitt, said that voters had given Trump a mandate to deliver on his campaign promises, including ending government attacks on internal combustion cars. I didn't notice those, but I'm sure they've happened. When he takes office, this is to quote her, when he takes office, President Trump will support the auto industry, allowing space for both gas-powered cars and electric vehicles, Leavitt said in a statement. So they do mention electric vehicles. I'm just saying that. So seriously, good luck with that to the new administration. We know that during the last Trump presidency, dozens of cities and states in the USA passed incredible renewable energy and clean air policies, which will probably happen again. And as I've said many times, this is a global transition. No one leader or country, no matter how powerful, can stem the tide of better, cleaner, and increasingly cheaper technology. Capitalism will have a role to play in this. Next story. For a bit of balance and an illustration of what is happening around the world, I would like to turn to another report from the rather wonderful Progress Playbook. Links to all these stories are in the show notes. According to a new report by non-profit research group RMI, and I quote, "Now that EVs have gone mainstream in several markets, we have a clear idea of which policies deliver results and which don't." This is very interesting. The report cites numerous examples, the most obvious being Norway, where now over 95% of new car sales are electric. And actually, I've just seen a report since this was written where it looks like they're going to be 100% of no one's going to buy petrol cars in Norway anymore. It's just that those days are gone. But 95% at the moment of new car sales are electric. And yes, of course, Norway is part funded by vast sales of oil and gas. We buy plenty of it. And their sovereign wealth fund is the biggest in the world. They have nearly as much money as a couple of billionaires in America. But that money is shared, it's shared between 5 to 6 million people. I mean, what a weird idea. It's so much better for one person to have all of it, don't you think, really? Slap my wrist, hush my mouth. Anyway, it's now clear that countries that were furthest ahead in the shift to EVs in 2023 have a combination of sales mandates, fuel regulations, and/or emissions standards, which we are seeing this all over the world, particularly in cities. What we now know is if you slowly but increasingly restrict the use of polluting vehicles in urban areas, people will slowly start to shift. We can see it around the world. In California, 26% of new car sales are electric. It's no longer a big deal. It's just a car that's nicer to drive and cheaper to fuel. In China, over 50% of new cars sold are electric. And remember, China is the biggest car market in the world by a country kilometre. 50%, half of all new cars sold in the biggest car market are electric. So when some whiner goes on and on about car sales, electric car sales slowing down, two things: they're wrong, and secondly, they haven't got a clue what they're talking about. Globally, we've seen a massive increase in the last year. Back in 2020, electric vehicle sales made up just over 1% of global new car sales. That was 5 years ago. In 2024, it was 20%. It's gone from 1 to 20%, and yet still some media outlets are going, "Oh, nobody's buying electric cars anymore." In the UK, there are now thousands of very reasonably priced second-hand electric cars that will last many years before you have to replace the car. The battery will be fine. The argument I routinely see in our YouTube comments and on Blue Sky and Threads is generally from men who come up with perfectly valid reasons to continue to burn fuel in combustion engines. They approach the topic as if the only consideration is the immediate day-to-day range and ease of use in a carefully constructed scenario that bolsters their very specific demands. They never, ever mention or acknowledge the concrete fact that there is a downside to us burning billions of barrels of a day of often imported toxic fossil fuel. The reason we're going through this painful and disruptive transition isn't a fashion thing or virtue signalling. It's because the technology we've been using for the past 100 years is highly problematic, and we all need to do something about it. Next story. Offshore wind turbines. Ask anyone who reads tabloid newspapers. They will joyfully tell you that these fancy, holier-than-thou wind turbines out at sea, they all kill whales. Oh, yeah, it's true. No, I saw it on Fox News. I read it in the Daily Mail. Wind turbines kill whales and birds, and anyway, they don't work. Drill and burn, baby. Drill and burn. Now, tiny bit of history. What used to be a rather major and dramatic cause of whale deaths was a thing called commercial whaling. That's where you shoot the whale with a big gun, it has an explosive harpoon, and it kills the whale, and you drag it onto your ship, cut it up. Thankfully, other than some Japanese weirdos who still eat whale meat, and I'm sure if that's culturally offensive, I'm glad, this has been reduced enormously, this dreadful old habit. And therefore, whale populations have rebounded very encouragingly. But sadly, the interaction of humans and whales still causes many whale deaths. And is it really down to a static wind turbine tower? Hard to tell. Well, a study led by the University of Washington and Seattle found that the number one cause of whale deaths is ship strikes. If busy shipping lanes overlap with commonly used whale migratory routes, the result is not pretty. Out in the deep ocean, this really isn't a problem, but where whales swim along the coast and where shipping is concentrated at global ports like Seattle and Vancouver, it can be kind of ugly. The researchers suggest that if ships slowed down in these areas and indeed used slightly different routes to get them into port, then whale deaths from ship impacts would be greatly reduced. Oh yeah, sorry, wind turbines. This story is all about those offshore wind turbines killing whales. Yeah, like you've read again and again. I've just heard it recently. Yeah, they don't kill whales. It's totally fabricated nonsense. Anyone who says that is a liar. And last story. Back to Australia, and this is from an article in The Driven, reporting that the federal government has announced a new initiative to provide $150 million of loans, not grants, loans to lower-income households and frontline workers in a bid to make new electric cars more accessible to more people. These low-interest loans are held at 5.4% and are focused on police officers, teachers, firefighters and healthcare workers. It's worth reminding ourselves that ever since we've been driving combustion cars, new cars have been far too expensive for the majority of proper normal people to buy. I'm not talking about electric cars. Any type of new car is really expensive. After buying a house, a car is by far the biggest purchase anyone makes. We've all grown up with a massive second, third and fourth hand car market. I certainly never drove a new car until I was in my late 50s, and even then it was on a lease. Who buys new cars? People who say, I can't afford a £40,000 car. Well, you're normal. Of course you can't. I can't. No one I know can afford to buy a £40,000 new car. I can't afford to buy a £30,000, £25,000. That's why we have all these different ways of accessing cars. And then second-hand cars are much cheaper. And second-hand electric cars, oh my God. Here in the UK, we've just experienced the first year where there is a sizable second-hand electric car market and a corresponding 501% increase in sales of second-hand electric cars. Isn't that incredible? Australia is a little behind, and it's going to take a few years until there is a healthy second-hand and third-hand electric car market in Australia, which means people on normal incomes can't afford new cars. So schemes like this are really important. So that's it. That's all the news I've gathered for this episode. I really hope you enjoyed that. I tried not to get too moody or too critical of too many things. I think I probably failed, as I normally do. But we are very excited about what's going on in Australia. We'll be filming there not before long. And the show in Sydney is just bonkers crazy big. So hopefully if you're in the Sydney environs, please do come along. They really are amazing events in Australia. And we've got some incredible speakers appearing at the show this year. That's all. Please do tell any friends or foes about this channel, the Everything Electric Show, and also our much bigger sister channel, the Fully Charged Show, which is going from strength to strength. But that's it. As always, if you have been, thank you for watching. All of the early adopters have bought EVs, or so they say, and now we need to persuade the early mainstream to drive electric. Advertising is going to play its part, of course, and that's what this episode is about. Abstract successes aside, a smashed Cybertruck window, Jaguar's copy nothing campaign, we're struggling to think of anything that really nails what is great about battery EVs. And this gave our CEO, Dan Caesar, an idea. Over to him to explain more.
Thank you, Robert. Let me start with a disclaimer. Over recent weeks, I've been puzzling more than ever as to how we take EVs to the masses. In addition to my role as CEO of the Fully Charged Show, I've taken on a new role as the launch CEO of Electric Vehicles UK. And today, we are opening a competition to create the best EV advert ever. Corporates, creatives, and kids, lend us your ideas. We want you to create the best EV advert ever. And we will make the best submissions open source for all to share and run the winning efforts on the Fully Charged Show. We are after 60-second adverts that could be broadcast on TV or on YouTube, as well as shorts for YouTube, Insta, and TikTok. And the good news is that kids of all ages can let their creativity run wild. We are also interested in print adverts, drawings, GIFs, memes, and any other format you think that might help move the needle. The only thing we ask is that these adverts are grounded in reality, based on battery EVs that are currently available and aren't far removed from the average person's reach. To mainstream EVs, we need them to appeal to the widest audience possible. Simply send them to competition@electricvehicles.uk.
We're really excited to partner with Duracell Energy to showcase their amazing renewable energy solutions. If you want to reduce your energy bills and join the renewable energy transition, installing home battery storage and solar panels at home is a great way to start. Duracell Energy's ecosystem of products typically partners with solar panels, but they can be used just as effectively without it, particularly for electric vehicle owners or anyone looking to take control of their energy. And with Duracell Energy's Platinum Homeowner offer, viewers can get a custom service that pairs you with top quality products and the best installers in your area. Your installation also comes with a 20-point check, a 6-month performance review, system health checks at 3 and 10-year periods, and outstanding local UK customer support every step of the way. Plus, Duracell Energy's batteries, inverters, and EV chargers work together on one easy-to-use app. With features like dynamic tariff integration and grid services, you'll be able to maximize your return. Ready to get started? You can get your quote today. And don't forget, we're also giving away a Duracell Energy Bunny in every episode. Just answer the question about Fully Charged by following the link in the description. Good luck!